All right, we can get going now. So we are still talking about crime theories, and our overall topic is still functionalism and how it looks at the world, but we're also including the other perspectives by way of contrast and by way of giving us a complete understanding of sociology, how sociology looks at crime, not just conflict theory. And so we were talking about conflict theory's approach to studying crime, and we said that it asks a different question, not so much why do people commit crime or why do some communities have crime and others don't, but really a different question, which is how do the powerful, how does the ruling class use the law and law enforcement to stay in power and keep its power over the working people? And so we talked about the idea of unequal laws. And we were also talking about unequal law enforcement. And we'll also talk about unequal courts. So we said that the laws themselves are designed so that the powerful often, if they get caught doing something, that the penalties aren't as bad for them as they are for working people. And in a lot of cases, their own behavior isn't defined as illegal, but other people's behavior is. We talked about, an example of that is, white collar crime versus street crime, or the way the tax laws clearly benefit those who invest money versus those who work to make money. And we also said law enforcement, the way the law is enforced is unequal. And we didn't get too far into that, but a key idea here is the idea of deviant places. So that's an idea I want to elaborate on. So we were talking about the idea that East LA, for example, or certain parts of Los Angeles have always had a high crime rate. If you compare crime rates in LA, you'll find certain areas are high crime areas consistently and others are not. And if you saw the LAPD, you would get the sense that they seem to only concentrate on certain neighborhoods, not on other neighborhoods. But they would say, the LAPD, well, we're just going where the crime is, and we have to patrol where the crimes are, not where they are not. But why is a place like East LA consistently a place of high crime? Is it because of Mexican people living there? Well, no, because as we said, it was before it was Mexican, it was high crime area. When it was Jewish, it was high crime area. In fact, nowadays, I think it's even more Salvadoran than Mexican. And there again, it's high crime. So what is the reason for the place being deviant, having deviant behavior in it, versus the people in it being bad people? The idea is, for example, zoning laws. Zoning is when cities are developed, like this one, certain things can be built in certain areas, certain zones, and certain things can't be done or built in other areas. For example, in our county, we have, for example, agricultural zoning, and on that land, you can only grow stuff. You have other land that's industrial, meaning you can have a factory or make other stuff on that land. Others is retail. You can have, you can sell stuff, sell and buy stuff there. So cities try to make sure that, things are organized and you don't just like have somebody growing a peach orchard in the middle of a housing complex, for example. If it's residential zoning, it's for housing. If it's agriculture, it's for agriculture. Well, one type of zone is known as a vice zone. A vice zone is a place where the city says certain kinds of behavior can go on there that is not illegal, but it's not necessarily fully legal either. Or it's the kind of thing that people don't want to necessarily have near their house going on, but it is legal. Can you think of the kinds of things that might be vices, the kinds of businesses, for example, that a city might have, but your mom might not want it near you? Are all businesses equally wholesome, or are there some businesses that are more kind of deviant than other businesses? What kinds of businesses are there out there that your mom might say, don't go there, or my small children, I might hold their eyes and not let them, or there might not even be children allowed? Smoke shops, what else? what other substances do people use that are, what? Liquor stores, bars, places where gambling goes on, like casinos, card rooms, pool halls, places where prostitution goes on or women's bodies are sold, like strip clubs, and things like that. So these are all things that are legal in some counties. Some counties don't allow them, things like gambling and strip clubs and even liquor. But if you have those things in your county, you might, as the respectable, powerful people of that county, want to make sure that those things are not near your family and your kids. Where do we find the casinos and strip clubs? In Marysville or in the Yuba Sutter area. If we think of Yuba Sutter as all one big city area, Yuba City and Marysville, are there places you can think of where you would find a strip club?
Isn't there like
One right here. Yeah. And what else is around Yuba College? Liquor stores, quite a few liquor stores, some bars nearby. And what else do we know about this neighborhood of Yuba County? It's one of the poorest. It's Linda. Linda is the low-income, not desirable place to live in Marysville. People who are have more wealth and respectability live elsewhere in Marysville. Or in this area, they live in Yuba City. And if you're the mayor of Yuba City or you're a wealthy businessman in Yuba City, do you want a strip club near your house with your kids? No, you want to live in a nice residential area where your property values are high. So if you go to the rich neighborhoods of Yuba City, they don't have bars and liquor stores and strip clubs there. But if you go to a place like Linda, where most people don't own their own homes, where it's a lot of rentals and things like that, in those kinds of communities, the people there don't have the power to stop a strip club from coming in or a smoke shop. If you're the powerful people with property you own, you can say to the city council, hey, you guys better not put that over there, or when you guys are doing your zoning, don't put a vice zone near Yuba City, keep that vice zone over there. And then they put a new casino in, this big one, and there is a casino in Marysville. It used to be called Casino Marysville or something like that, and then there's also one like Golden State Casino, I don't know if it even goes on over there, but then they built a big one, the Hard Rock Casino, and some people were saying if you put that there, we already have addiction problems in Marysville. We have drug addiction, gambling addiction, other kinds of addiction, and if you put that there, you're gonna be preying on people who with addictions and stuff like that. And I don't know what the record shows, but again, the powerful people like to have a casino come to the county because that brings money into the county. And if you're the city council and you're the mayor, that money is money you can spend on stuff that makes you look like you're a good politician. But if you're the children of a low-income Spanish-speaking person, and now you have to live near a casino or a liquor store, it might not be as good for you. And so these vice zones create what are called deviant places. They're the place in a community where people go to be deviant. They go there to gamble. They go there to go to a strip club. They go to buy alcohol. Oftentimes there's illegal things going on, like drugs are being sold there. Actual prostitution is going on. Loan sharking is going on. People lending money at high rates and stuff like that. So those are the areas where, like in LA, like South Central LA is where a lot of the big casinos are and strip clubs and things like that. And so if you live in West LA and you want to have a fun night out of alcohol and drinking and women or whatever, you go down to that part of town. And your part of town is still nice with lawns and houses. There's no businesses around, it's residential. And so wealthy people make sure the communities that their kids grow up in are mainly residential and have nice trees and nice houses, and the vice, the stuff they don't want their kids to see, is somewhere where the poor people live. And poor people don't have the power, they don't have connections on the city council, they don't donate money to the elect people running for office, and so they don't have the power to stop those things. And so again, the conflict there says, if young, poor, low-income people get involved in crime, which maybe more often they do, it isn't because their parents aren't teaching them right, or because they have bad genes or something like that. It's if you're growing up around constantly bad stuff going on, then you can it goes back to that other theory of differential association. If there's a lot of crime going on in your community, you have more chance of getting sucked into it, getting recruited into it, learning how to sell drugs, learning how to be a prostitute, learning how to gamble and stuff like that. So, so it isn't an accident that the poor people are getting, exposed to and involved in more deviant crime activities than the working people, or than the wealthy people. And by the way, if you're poor, these are possible ways to make money as well. And so it's these are persistent problems in those communities. They can be. But again, if we're asking who becomes a criminal, a lot of kids growing up in those neighborhoods won't ever become criminals. They see it, they don't want to be part of it, they want to get out of that neighborhood, they want to move on to something better. But the crime rate in that neighborhood stays high. And it isn't necessarily the residents living there that are causing that. It's people coming there to buy drugs, people coming there to do prostitution. So the place is deviant, but the people living there may not, in fact, be criminal-minded people. They're just poor and powerless. So, so that's another example of how, and so the cops are enforcing that the law in those places. That's where the helicopters are, that's where the spotlights are. And if you're a poor kid growing up in a poor family, you're more likely to get caught up by the cops. I mean, again, we mentioned earlier, a lot of teenagers do illegal stuff. I have teenagers. I know they've done stuff. They tell me about it. They tell me later. Drinking underage or trying a drug you're not supposed to and things like that. So everybody does that, or lots of people do. A high percentage of people in every family, every community does that. But if you're growing up in an area where the cops are constantly patrolling, and you also have limited space, if you're poor, you don't have, like my kids, just to talk about me, we have an extra house on our property. We have 2 homes there, and the second cottage is where my daughters get to hang out and live. And so they may do deviant stuff back there. I'm pretty sure they do. I smelled it. But they're not going to get caught by the cops. They're nice. They're in a cottage on my property. Cops can't come on there unless they got probable cause. But if we rented and there was like 10 of us living in a small 2-bedroom, where would kids go to smoke pot? They'd go to the park or something like that. And we do have a park behind our house. And if you're smoking pot in the park and the helicopters are over, you may well get caught up. And so so it's not, again, that these children of the poor people are more deviant. It's just they're more likely to be exposed to the police and caught up in the criminal justice system. And once you're caught up in the criminal justice system, it can be very hard to get out of it. So these cops patrolling only the poor areas wouldn't say, yes, we're racist. They'd say we're just patrolling the high crime area, but they're not sociologists. They're just dealing with life as it is right now. But as sociologists, we have to think of history and go, when did this become a deviant place and why? And who lives here and who has always lived here and who lives here now? And if we ask those larger sociological questions, remember history and biography, some kid growing up in that area and the history, he's not even aware of it. If he's growing up in some other area, he might have a very different outcome in his life. So it isn't about what's going on in people's private lives that turns them into criminals, according to conflict theory. It's what's in the structure of society, the who has what, that determines who gets exposed to what. Unequal courts is the one that I probably don't need to convince you very much about. Most Americans acknowledge and agree, yeah, it's unfair the way our system works. If you're wealthy, you can afford a good lawyer. And if you can afford a good lawyer in our system, you have a much better chance of being found innocent, having reasonable doubt, than if you're poor. If you're poor, they give you what's called a public defender. And a public defender is somebody that has a bunch of 20 or 30 cases of other people that he or she is defending. You don't have a dream team. If you have a dream team, like O.J. Simpson, I don't know if that reference is too old, but he was a rich football player that was accused of murdering his wife and her boyfriend. He got off. He's black. Is our system racist? Maybe. But he's rich. And he had the dream team. And the Kardashians are still famous because their dad was one of his lawyers. And that's the only reason they're famous is because their dad was O.J. Simpson's lawyer. But anyway, what's my point? My point is, if you're the Kardashians, if you are O.J. Simpson, you can afford good legal counsel. And how did O.J. get off? Not only did he have good lawyers, like 5 of them, they could hire a bunch of other people, like investigators, private investigators, to go to the crime scene and do things like, well, we found these gloves, and these gloves are too small for OJ, so if the glove doesn't fit, you must convict, you must acquit, they said. And so he was found not guilty. But again, so if you have money and the resources, you can defend yourself. The public defenders are the ones that everybody has a right to a lawyer, but if you can't afford a dream team, they give you a public defender, and the public defenders are under-resourced. They don't have private eyes to help you. They don't have a team of guys. They just have the one guy. And so you're totally at a disadvantage. You're fighting a battle, and you're unarmed, and the government, the prosecutors, are armed. And so if you can't lawyer up and defend yourself, you're gonna end up getting, and so a lot of people just plead guilty, even when they're not in our system. A lot of people just go, okay, whatever. If that's gonna give me less time, I'll plead out to the plea bargain. So prosecutors will say, hey, you don't have to go to trial. We'll just let you do this much time. But if you are found guilty, you're gonna do much more. So which is it? And a lot of people go, well, okay, I guess I'm guilty. I'll plead guilty. And so that's not democratic. That's not fair. That's not due process. But it is what conflict theorists say. It's just the raw power of the wealthy to say, if you're poor, good luck to you. And not just poor. I mean, at this point, if you're middle class, you're at a disadvantage in our legal system compared to wealthy guys that are, accused of like 50 felonies. How many felonies right now does Trump have? And he may get off on all of them. And I don't think it's because he's not guilty. But anyway, so that's conflict theory, people disagree about it. But what about, so there's one more theory I want to talk about that's not really conflict theory or functionalism or symbolic interactionism. I'm going to put it kind of in its own category. And that's because it too is kind of asking a different question. We saw that if you're trying to explain the variance, we said that's what a good theory does. A good theory says we're trying to explain the variations in crime. Depends what variation you're talking about, but if you're talking about like variations in who gets arrested, and we see, for example, poor non-white kids are more likely to get arrested for the same things than rich white kids. That's a variation. And we're trying to explain, what explains why that is? What's our theory for that variation? Or another variation might be, why does a town like Linda have a high crime rate, but a town like Santa Barbara doesn't? What are the factors? What are the variables on this side that explain the variation on this side? And if your theory is good, it explains a lot of the variation. But as we saw, if you're trying to explain like what, if you say, well, like conflict theory did, low-income kids are more likely to get involved in crime and stuff, and strain theory said that. Well, is that actually true? Does that explain it? I mean, are rich people not involved in crime, or are they just not caught? I mean, if you're trying to explain who's actually involved in crime or not, does the low-income thing explain it? Not really. There's other variables that people try to explain, but as you keep trying to explain the variance, you keep finding that you're not, what you keep finding, as we said, is most people are not involved in crime. So even in a deviant place like Linda, the vast majority of the kids growing up there are not going to be criminals. So if you're making this big argument about why, inequality in our society is causing these kids to become criminals, and you're like, well, most of them are not, then maybe you're trying to explain the wrong thing. The variation is 95% of people are not criminals, and 5% are. So if you're only trying to explain that 5%, oh, it's because they grew up in a deviant place. Well, there was 95% of people that grew up in that same place, and they didn't do it. So this theory says maybe we shouldn't be trying to explain crime. Crime is like 5% of people or something like that. But what about the 95% of people who are conformists? People who don't commit a lot of crime. That is a bigger variation. That's a bigger part of the data. We're looking at a bunch of data, and there's a little group over here that's criminals, and we're like, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? And this theory says maybe we should be looking at the other 95 and going, why are they not criminals? And if we ask that question, maybe we'll explain more of the variance. So control theory says not not why do people commit crime. Or why do some people? But why are most people non-criminals? And so if that becomes your theoretical question, the thing you're trying to explain, why are most people not criminals? You're gonna have to kind of come at the question and come up with different variables than if you're trying to explain why some people are criminals. And what is the explanation? If you think about your own self, if you're not involved heavily in crime, and you compare yourself to people you know who are, what might be some differences? What does control theory says is the difference? Control theory says it's basically self-control. Self-control is key. That the big difference between a criminal and a non-criminal, according to this theory, is that a criminal doesn't really control him or herself. They allow themselves to go do this bad stuff. Whereas according to this theory, most of us want to do bad stuff. We could, but we don't. We control ourselves. So all of us, have temptations maybe to like pinch that butt or take that thing that's not ours or punch that person that we want to kill. But, we don't. So what explains why some people have that self-control to not do bad stuff and other people seem to just let their inner beast come out? That's what this theory is suggesting, is that crime, that all of us have this potential beast inside of us that wants to come out and do bad stuff, but we have to control that beast. And the people who are conformists are people doing a good job of controlling it. There's different versions of this theory trying to explain why some people have the self-control and others seem to struggle with it. And the one that's gotten the most attention is called social bond theory. And it basically says if you're bonded to your society, and it's a very functionalist idea, really. We talked about solidarity being like a glue. And so this theory is also saying if you are glued to your society, to the group of people that you are part of, then you're not going to want to violate them or go against them or, be a bad guy in their world. But if you're not bonded to your society, to your group, then you're kind of free to just be against it. And so and so it says there are 4 elements of the social bond. And it says if you have all of these elements in place, if you as a person, and again, this theory focuses on young people, if a young person growing up in America has all 4 of these bonds in place, or elements of the bond, then you can say they have a strong bond. But if any one of these elements is weakened or non-existent, then the person doesn't have a strong bond. So what are these elements? The first one is attachment. And that means attachment to a law-abiding adult. So one thing a kid needs growing up is at least one person in this world who is an adult, who is a law-abiding person, and that kid is attached to them, meaning I look up to them, I care about them, I want them to like me and care about me. So who could that person be? Who would be a good adult for a kid to be attached to in that way? Who do you think a kid needs to look up to as an adult in their life that is a law-abiding person and they look up to that person? Parent would be a good one. Yeah, I mean, most of us hope that our parents do that. But this theory is interesting in that it says it doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. It should be an adult, and maybe parents would be ideal, and maybe in an ideal situation, a kid has 2 parents that they love and are attached to and they look to. But there's a lot of kids in this world that don't necessarily have that, and this theory says you don't necessarily have to. I mean, there's some people that say you got to have a strong dad. If you don't have a strong dad, you will not make it. And this theory says, no, it could be some other adult. It could be a coach. It could be a priest. It could be an older relative, a cousin, but it has to be somebody. If a kid doesn't have this adult person that's a law-abiding person, then they don't really have somebody in the adult group that they look up to, and they're just kind of being guided by the other kids. And so you have to have this kind of person that's looking out for you, somebody that you feel like, I don't want to do bad, or I don't want to violate society because I want this person to still think I'm good and want to look out for me and want to care for me. And if that person's a law abider, then I don't want to be a lawbreaker because that person might not want to be my buddy. But that's not enough. Another one is involvement. And this means in pro-social activities. So you can think of crime as antisocial. It goes against the group. If you're breaking the rules, and rules, as we've said, come from the group decides what the rules are. And if you say, I don't care, I'm going to do my own thing, you're saying, I don't care about the group, I'm violating it. And so this theory says for a kid, one way to keep a kid out of violating behaviors or antisocial ones is to keep them involved in pro-social ones. Ones that do respect the group's rules. So obviously things like school. If you're in school all day, you're not out there committing crime, hopefully. I mean, it's possible to commit crime at school, but if you're actually taking school seriously and trying hard in school, then you're not doing things like, putting a bomb in the bathroom and stuff like that. And you're not out on the street doing stuff like stealing stuff. So that would be another place. But what about after school? It's also things like after school programs. Or it could be things like sports, or a job, or a church, or something like that, a church group. But as long as it's a positive activity, a pro-social one, then you just don't have time on your hands for the negative ones. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying that some moms like to say, idle hands are the devil's workshop. Have you ever heard idle hands are the devil's workshop? Ever heard that? No? It's an old saying, meaning idle means bored. I'm not doing anything, I'm just sitting around. And there's an old wives' tale, it's called, that says if you're just bored and sitting around with idle hands, not working or not doing anything, then you're gonna be tempted by the devil, basically, to go do bad stuff. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. So the devil's like, oh, well, you're not working, I'm gonna put you to work doing this. And this theory is basically saying that same thing that, old ladies have always said, which is you got to get kids involved in positive stuff, or they're going to be tempted to do bad stuff. If they're bored and sitting around, they'll come up with bad things to do. But if you get them involved in organized good activities like sports or church groups or other things, they won't be doing those bad stuff. And this whole theory is a little old-fashioned, as I'm going to suggest to you in the way it looks at things, but the final, so involvement, you also have to have a commitment. And this means to a future goal. So we have attachment, involvement, commitment is a future goal. And this is the idea of delayed gratification. Instant gratification is when you just have fun right now. I don't know if you've ever heard like the phrase YOLO, you only live once, or laugh now, cry later. Just have fun now and don't worry about the future. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? That attitude is the kind of attitude that can lead to deviant, self-destructive behaviors. But if you have a sort of long-term view, I have this future goal, like I want to be a doctor one day. If you want to be a doctor one day, and your friends say, hey, let's go outside and, go get drunk and like put bombs in bathrooms or something, you'll be like, well, that sounds fun, but I've got to study for my math exam tomorrow, because if I don't pass my math exam, I won't pass math class, and I won't get into med school, and then I won't be a doctor one day, and that's my goal. So I have this better goal. I'd rather be a doctor one day than run around with you guys putting bombs in mailboxes or whatever the deviant activity is. And so having that kind of goal in the future is what kind of can keep people on the straight path. You've got this eyes on the prize, going towards that. I don't need to hear these distractive things that other kids or vegan people are telling me to do. But finally, you actually have to belief in society's rewards. You have to actually believe that society will reward you with this goal if you do the things that society says you're supposed to. Like our society says, if you work hard in school and try hard and listen to your teachers and listen to your mom and do all the right things, you will be a successful American. But if a lot of kids see people doing that and they don't end up successful, they saw their cousin who did everything right and played football and did well in school, but now he's a garbage collector. Or their dad tried hard and did everything right, but then got laid off and now he's unemployed, or got injured on the job and now he sits around and the government doesn't care. I mean, if you grow up in a world like that, you see all these people that did play by the rules, but then they didn't get rewarded. And they ended up not, you may just conclude like they're playing me for a sucker. They're telling me I gotta obey the rules, but that's not gonna get me what they're saying it will. So I think I'll just go sell drugs. F school. I don't know. There's a lot of rap songs that are about that. Like, you know, if I can make 5G a week selling crack, like why would I go to school? And so that's, but if you really do believe that society will reward me, that I'll be better off in the long run with playing by the rules and going to school and getting a job and working hard, if you really believe that, then you can really hold on to your goal and really, you know, stay committed to people. But a lot of young people have all these other things, but then they get to like young adulthood and see the unfairness of our society, and they might say, well, I'm not going to be a sucker. I'm not going to just do what they say because they're not going to do what they're saying they will. But as long as you have all four of these things in place and you really believe, and I got a goal, and I got a person watching out for me, and I know I'm going to get to my goal, if you've got all that, this theory says you're going to be a very hard person to tempt into crime because you're on this strong path. And this theory, by the way, is very, like I said, old-fashioned, but another way to put it is that it's a conservative theory. It has a conservative view of society and people. And the person who came up with this theory, by the way, is a conservative person politically. What do I mean by conservative theory? So it's a conservative theory, control theory, but it has led to liberal findings. So a couple things I'm trying to get across with this statement. It's a conservative theory, but it's led to liberal findings. So one thing I want to get across is what's the difference between conservative and liberal in this case? Another thing is, what is the difference between theory and findings? So a theory is just a guess about how people act or should act or will act. And the author of this theory, control theory, or social bond theory, is Travis Hershey. So he's the theorist. And you can ask, well, does the theory actually explain the variance? Is it just a guess that isn't true? Or is it a guess that when we go and look at data, if we go and actually collect data on people who are criminals and people who are not criminals, what do we find? Is it actually true that the ones who are not criminals, we could see and measure that they have 4 elements of the bond and it was a strong bond, and the ones who were criminals didn't, maybe missing a bond or didn't have any of it? Is that true? Well, the findings, so studies, when people actually go and collect data and analyze the data and see if it actually fits the theory, that's what we mean by findings, doing an actual study. Not just making a guess up about how people are, but actually collecting the data and see if it works out. And the findings have been very supportive of the theory. I would say that this theory, they say, is the dominant theory in sociology these days for understanding how to think about crime. So many studies have used the theory and the data was explained. In other words, when you look at people who are involved in crime, and you ask, well, what's different about them from the people who aren't? You can see and measure. And what's interesting is, well, why is that liberal? And why is he conservative? In this case, what I'm talking about is what is the view of human nature? This is an old question in sociology. What are people really like? In other words, what are we like if we don't have society? If we were like in a state of nature, is how the old theorists used to put it. If you could imagine a human being living in a forest somewhere with no other people, what would that person be like? And sociology, by the way, says, well, we don't know because there never has been such a person. But is there a sort of basic way that humans are? Conservatives seem to say that the basic view of human nature is that it's evil, that we are sinful, we are born sinners. If you are a religious person or go to like Catholic Church and things like that, they may give you a similar view. And Travis Hershey, this author, is Catholic, and he's strongly Catholic in his beliefs. And he believes that that's humans' natural state, is to go and do bad stuff to each other, to rape each other, to hurt each other, steal from each other. That's just how we are. And because we're that way, we need a strong chain holding us back, holding that inner beast inside of us back. And and religious people will say it's the word of God that is your strong anchor that's going to keep you from doing those bad things. If you just read the word of God, go to church, stay in, good in God's eyes, you will stay on the straight and narrow path, they call it. So don't get off the path, stay on that path. And that's what Hershey seems to be saying, that human beings, that all of us are born criminals. We're capable of being criminals. We want to be criminals. But the only thing that stops us is we've got this social bond telling us, don't do it. Stay in control. Don't do that bad stuff. And if we don't have it, then we're just free to go do bad stuff. It's a conservative theory in that sense, the way it views people. Liberals, so conservatives, are people, if you want to say, what is a conservative? This is a pretty simplistic, but I think accurate definition of conservative people, is they think we have to have like strong government, strong military, strong law enforcement, guns in the hands of everybody, because people are evil, and you've got to be watching out for them at all times. Liberals, though, tend to have the view that human nature is either good or blank. You may have heard the term blank slate. The original theorists used to say, humans are just a blank slate. When a baby's born, he's neither good nor bad. He just is, or she is. And it's her experiences in life that shape her into the kind of person she is. So when you're born, you're just neither here nor there, but it's the experiences in life. On the other hand, some liberals say, no, you're actually born good. You're actually born already with this morality of saying, like, I don't want to hurt people. I want to get along with people. I want to be loved and love. So some liberals say, actually, humans are very loving, non-sinful people. And in fact, they would blame the church and others for teaching people to be that they are evil or something like that. Well, in what way are these findings liberal? So the theory is conservative in that it seems to say we need to have a strong social bond or else we're going to go out and do bad stuff. But what's liberal about it? Well, the findings have shown, for example, that race is not significant. Determinant or cause of crime. Now again, some conservatives will say you can't trust those non-white people. Those non-white people, they're bad, they're evil, they go around doing bad stuff. That's why we have to have white people in charge of stuff. They don't say this openly, but if you look at what Trump movement seems to be saying now, basically say white people are better morally than the darky people, and so that's why they need to be in charge of stuff. Well, liberals have never said that. We've said it all along, people are born equal and they deserve equal rights and equal treatment, and there shouldn't be special rights for some people over other people. So So liberals believe in that kind of equality of people. And the findings have shown that Black people are no more likely to be criminals, or Latino people or Asian people are not less likely to be criminals, or white people less likely, if you don't focus on their race, but just focus on, do you have the bond or not? Then poor Black kids in the ghetto, if they have a strong social bond, are very law-abiding kids. Meanwhile, rich white kids in certain communities that don't have a good bond with their parents, that don't have a future goal in life, they are just as deviant as a gangbanger in South Central LA. And I can tell you this from experience myself, having gone to a very elite school on the East Coast with people with parents making millions and millions of dollars, way more than I ever had. Like one of the girls I went to school with, her last name is Pillsbury. Have you ever heard of Pillsbury Foods and Pillsbury Doughboy and all that? Well, she gets to inherit like $70 million after college. So people like that, they already have it made. A lot of the people I knew there, they didn't really know their parents. They had gone to prep school. So a lot of rich people send their kids to prep school where you actually live at school the whole high school time and you rarely see your parents. And a lot of these rich people I talked to were not happy people. They're like, you got to know your parents? Wow. You like lived with them? I'm like, yeah. And they were saying this to me while they were snorting cocaine. What I'm saying is a lot of these rich people were very deviant people doing deviant stuff, selling cocaine at the college and stuff like that. And so in my experience, rich white people on the East Coast weren't more law-abiding than the people I teach at Yuba College. Poor white, Black, and Latino and Asian people, or not always poor, but certainly not rich. And so it's not about your race. It's not about class. And even more important, so rich people are just as capable of being deviant and bad as poor people. White people are just as capable of being poor and bad as non-white people. But even more important from a liberal standpoint is that family structure is not significant. A lot of conservatives say the whole problem is the family. If you don't have a strong family, if you don't have a dad at home, a strong dad and a good mom, then you're headed for trouble. And according to this view, that's why, for example, we shouldn't have welfare for poor people, according to conservatives. Because if you give welfare to women who aren't married, they'll just stay unmarried and they'll sit around with kids and they'll have kids and they won't get married, and that will be the end of America when women get free money. But this theory shows children growing up with single moms aren't necessarily more likely to be criminals than kids growing up with strong dads at home. In fact, there's plenty of people with a strong dad at home who hate their dad, whose dad abuses them, and that's why they're involved in crime and stuff like that. But if you have a single mom at home, and she loves you and she's watching out for you, and you have the goals and you have the commitments and the beliefs and all of that, you're just as likely to be a law-abiding person as, again, these kids I knew at college that had two parents, had plenty of money, had a strong dad that was the CEO of his company, but they didn't have the bond. They didn't love their parents, they didn't feel connected to them, they didn't feel connected to society, they just saw themselves as rich kids that were weirder or different than other people, and so the rules didn't apply to them. I think of Donald Trump, for example, as that kind of guy, a guy that he's never thought the rules apply to him. Those apply to other people, not me. And to me, he's a very deviant guy. So I don't know why people are like, he should be our president. But anyway, so liberal findings in that you can have a single mom. You can be a poor, non-white person with a single mom and still be a very law-abiding, good person. And you could be a rich person with two parents and still be a terrible criminal. So it isn't about your class, your race, or your family structure. It's about, do you have this bond? And what does it take to make sure people have that bond? Now, it's true that if you grow up in certain circumstances in our society, it's harder to have that bond. I mean, if you see everybody around you failing and no good jobs around, it's hard to maintain that belief and commitment to your goal. But again, if you do have it, you're not likely to be involved in crime. So that's the key, is the bond, not your background or your environment or things like that. So it's not really if we had to put it in a category of sociology, control theory certainly fits with functionalism and this idea that we have to have solidarity and strong bonds to each other to be good people. And so it certainly is a functionalist kind of theory, but it's not really a theory of crime. So I'm not putting it in the category of crime theories. It's a theory of conformity. It's a theory of why most of us, most of the time, are obeying the rules. Well, how do we know? That's the next question I have for you. How do we know which theories work or which don't? Like I said, we have to look at data. But what data can we look at and where do we get it? And that's something I haven't said much at all about in this class, and I will later. But that is one of the things sociologists do, is gather information and study it, analyze it, and then try to put it into answering research questions, like who's more involved in crime or why. And so we have to ask, though, if you're going to gather data, where do you get the data? Let me ask you this question. So here's a basic research question that I wonder if you have an answer to. Is crime going up right now in America, or is crime going down? I think it matters, doesn't it? I mean, we have a big political election coming up, and everybody's worried about who should lead the country, and I'm sure one of the issues the candidates will be debating and discussing is, is crime out of control in America, or is it under control? One big reason people vote for politicians is if they feel they're being kept safe by them or not. So in your own view, and you are citizens, and you're all over 18, I believe, and you should vote in the upcoming election, is crime going up or down in your feeling, in your view? You have no thoughts on the matter? Doesn't matter? Doesn't matter if crime's going up.
I think it's going up, because people are losing their jobs, and, so I think.
Uh-huh. Well, so certainly that's a sociological argument you're making, is that the crime rate would be connected with the employment rate. So if there's employment's high and everybody has jobs, maybe they won't be committing crime. But if employment's down and people are, hurting economically, maybe crime will go up. That's what we would call the liberal theory of crime, and we'll take that up. I question your premise though a little bit, because again, on the data, is unemployment going up? You said people are losing their jobs. In fact, the data we see is that unemployment is going down and things are going well economically. But it is weird that a lot of Americans, if you ask them, is the economy doing well? A lot of them say no, even though all the economists and all their data say it is. So there is an issue in America where the data that scientists are using doesn't feel like the reality for Americans. Like, same thing happened with COVID. The scientists are saying if you get a vaccine, if you wear a mask, you will be much less likely to get COVID. But then you had all these regular Americans going, I don't believe that data, I don't trust it, I'm not listening to it, and then they got COVID and stuff like that. Well, same thing, a lot of Americans think crime's way out of control and think the unemployment rate's out of control. Both are not true. But if you ask this question, is crime going up or down? It's a difficult question. You can always say yes. Because there's many different crimes. And so your answer to the question should be, it depends. Like, what do you mean by crime? What do you mean by going up? Compared to what? Compared to yesterday? Compared to 10 years ago? Compared to 50 years ago? And what do you mean by crime? Do you mean shoplifting? Do you mean jaywalking? Do you mean bank robbery? Do you mean murder? Do you mean assault? What do you mean by crime? What do you mean by up? And so seems like a simple question to begin with, is crime going up or down? And people seem to have opinions on it, but when you start asking, well, what do you mean by that? It's a much more complicated question. What do we mean by, well, how do we measure crime? And by the way, I'll just kind of, normally I wait till later to tell you this, but crime overall, we could say is down. It's down a lot. If you're using in that definition, crime meaning violent crime. And if you mean down compared to, say, its peak. So if you were to look at a big chart of crime, the crime rate, if this was 1980 and this is 2024, I'm just giving you a rough picture. Crime was steady at the beginning of 1980. It started to go up at the end of the 1980s. In 1993, violent crime reached its peak in America. And basically ever since, crime's been going down in America since 1993. 1993 was the big peak of violent crime, and ever since it's really been going down. You can say nowadays it's not really lower than it was in the 80s, but it seems to be kind of leveling off. And so, but a lot of Americans, if you ask them, is crime going up? They'll say, yeah, it's terrible. And Trump says it all the time. When he was elected the first time, he said, the carnage in America is out of control. There's just so much carnage, meaning, I guess he meant murders and violence. But if you had said Trump compared to what? And compared to last year, no. Compared to 10 years ago, no. It's way down. And it still is. It's something that Americans should be proud about. We should say, you know what? We as a society actually way reduced our crime rate. And it shows that we're successful as a society. But a lot of Americans think it's way out of control. And so one question to ask is, why is people's perceptions of things different than the data is showing us? Like with COVID, like with this. Do you have any thoughts on that? Why would Americans think that crime is way worse than it is? Where do they get their information from? Where do you get your information from?
Because like the news shows like all the bad things, and that's what you like believe in.
Exactly. Well, why does the news show the bad things? So there's a term in the news industry that says if it bleeds, it leads. Meaning if you're doing TV news, your goal as a TV news broadcaster is to have people watch your news, but then stay tuned in. The way the TV business works is you get paid more as a station if people stay watching your stuff. If they just turn on and then go to something else, then you don't get as much money. If you're gonna like charge an advertiser, you wanna put a commercial on my news show, you better give me this much money. And they're gonna say, well, no one watches your show. They just leave it or they don't even tune into it. But if I can show, they watch my news show, then you gotta pay me a lot to put your commercial on there. Well, how do you get people to watch? If you say, nothing bad happened in Sacramento, news at 11. Is anyone going to want to watch your show? They do these things called teasers, like they try to get you to watch the news. And how do they tease you? They say, murder in, South Sacramento, murder in West Sacramento, murder in Del Paso Heights, or whatever, murder in, Natomas. And you're like, murder? I want to see that. For whatever reason, when people hear there was a murder, or people got shot, or people got beat up, they want to tune in. And so if they tune in, that's always going to be the first thing that the news wants to tell you about. Not because it's the most important news, but because it's the thing that gets people to watch. Now, the most important news might be like, crime is down in America over the last 20 years. But they didn't tell you that part. That doesn't get people to tune in. Crime is down, you're safe. News at 11. There's dangerous stuff happening. News at 11. Okay, I better watch the news. So every night they're going to tell you some murder somewhere happened, and every night they make that the first story. But one murder here or there isn't really making you unsafe. But it's always the lead story. It's always the first thing we hear. So night after night, Americans are like, God, there's just so much murder all the time. Well, it's just that it's always the top story, but it isn't really the most important thing, possibly. It's just the thing that people tune in for, and so news programs like to put it on. Another reason is because the ads, look at what the ads are when you watch the news. They're for things that are supposed to make you feel better. Like they say, there's crime all over Sacramento, and now here's a commercial for an anti-anxiety drug. And now here's a commercial for the eye, or what do they call that thing, for your home, so you can protect your home with an alarm system and cameras. And here's a commercial for a claw, so you can protect your car from getting stolen. So in other words, there's a culture of fear is what I'm talking about. The culture of fear. The news benefits from scaring you because they want you to watch. And the advertisers who pay to put their commercials on, they benefit because they want you to be scared because then you'll buy their stuff. You'll buy their anti-anxiety medication. They try to make you scared about a lot of stuff. You're not attractive enough. Your breath stinks. You're too fat. You don't have good clothes. All these things, the commercials are designed to make you feel bad about yourself or scared or insecure so that you'll go buy stuff that can make you not feel those things. But it's a sick kind of thing is what I'm saying. But a lot of Americans then are overly fearful and overly insecure and overly critical of themselves because the media keeps telling them to feel that way. But how do we know for real? How do sociologists measure crime? If I were to give you this assignment right now, can you tell me what percentage of Yuba College students use methamphetamine? I just need a percentage. I'll give you an A in this class and you don't have to come anymore to class. Just give me the percentage of Yuba College students that use meth in the last month. Can you find it out? If I set you out right now and say come back on Tuesday with the answer and I'll give you an A for the class, could you do it? Or how would you do it? Who would you go ask? What would you go look up? It's not a rhetorical question, I'm just saying it's a practical question. I want to find out that it exists, right? This answer exists somewhere. There are Yuba College students, some of them probably used meth in the last month, but I need to know how many. How do I find it out? Shouldn't I talk to the cops? Don't the police know this? Do you think they do? If I went and said to police, what percentage of you college, we have a campus police still, they're getting rid of it soon. But that's their job, is to protect this campus, enforce the law on this campus. Don't they know? If I ask them, how many people did you arrest for meth last year or in the last month? Would that tell me the answer? You never thought about these things, okay? Maybe not. Most of us don't. But, so there's two main ways to measure crime. You could ask the cops, and they would give you some information that they have, but that information might not be complete. There is official data, it's called, official measures of crime, and unofficial measures of crime. So if I went to the police and they said, well, actually, you know what? We didn't make any arrests last year or last month for methamphetamine. Could I conclude then, could you come back to me on Tuesday and say, Dr. Fox, the answer is 0. 0% of Yuba College students used meth. Would that be, do you think, the accurate answer? Why not? Because they didn't get caught. Yeah, so who the cops get isn't an accurate reflection of what actually occurs. And so arrests do not equal crime. Just because you know how many people have been arrested for something, and even who's been arrested for it, that isn't in itself an accurate depiction of crime. Why not? Well, like you said, a lot of people don't get caught. In fact, the vast majority of crime is not reported to the police, and the police have no knowledge of it. So the vast majority of crime is I don't want to write all that down, but you can write, vast majority is unreported, first of all. Even violent crime. I don't know how many times you've had a crime committed against you. Have you ever had something vandalized? Have you ever had something taken? Have you ever had somebody violate your physical being and you didn't call the cops? Probably a lot. Probably more times than the times you did call the cops. So a lot of crime is just not reported. So when we say, who did the cops get? That's not, so a lot of unreported crime so these are reasons why you can't just say arrests are the same thing as crime. First of all, most crime is not reported. Second of all, arrests are biased. What does biased mean? Biased means tilted. Are all people, so a lot of crime is unreported. Does that mean the crime that is reported and that the cops do catch is an accurate picture of the crime? In other words, are there certain groups that are more likely to catch for doing bad things than other people? Well, yeah, if you think back to the point we made earlier about vice zones and deviant places, the police are much more able to catch you and convict you if you're a poor person, If you're a rich person, they can't even catch you doing bad stuff because of what? Well, things like our private property laws. We have laws in this country that says if you own your own property, then what you're doing on that property, it's not that easy for the cops to just come find out. They need to have probable cause. They need to have a warrant. They need to be able to prove to the judge that they have a probable reason that you're doing bad stuff. On the other hand, if you're poor and you live in an apartment complex and you don't have any private property to be on, then the things you do that are illegal, the cops are much more able to see it. Again, if you're talking about young people don't have their own private spaces to do stuff, especially if they're poor. So they go and do it in parks or other public places and they get caught. Or poor people smoking crack or doing it in an alleyway where the cops are patrolling by. Whereas rich guys smoking their crack and, are doing it in their fancy mansion in Beverly Hills. So it's not that rich people don't do crime, it's that poor people are much more likely to be seen and they're much more exposed to the police. So when we look at when we say it's biased towards poor people, the poor, the non-white, the young. That's who the cops are more able to catch and observe and see. You can think of the cops as a spotlight in the darkness. There are a lot of crime going on out there, and what they see is only a part of it, what their light can catch. And who do they catch in their light? They tend to catch poor people and powerless people. The rich and powerful are not observable to them. And so that's all they catch in their light. So even if they're not trying to be racist and unequal, even if you have a really great cop who's like, I treat all people equally, his job is such that he's not going to get a chance to catch rich people and powerful people doing bad stuff. So arrests aren't even a measure of crime, and when we do try to use them to measure crime, we get a biased picture. We get a not accurate picture of who's criminal. It looks like if you just look at all the people arrested, a lot of them are non-white, a lot of them are poor, a lot of them are that. But it's not accurate in terms of who's actually doing illegal things. And so how could you get at that? Well, if I went to the cops here and said, how many are doing meth? And they said, we didn't arrest anybody. So the answer is not zero. Do you have other ideas about how we can find out how many Yuba College students used meth last month?
We could ask the students ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. It's a survey. And the survey is a very common way that sociologists gather data. If we want to find out what people are up to or what they think or who they're going to vote for or what their favorite ice cream is or what they did over the weekend, we give them a survey. And we ask people to fill stuff out. We ask them to tell us. So the two main types of data here, arrest statistics are one type. You can count up who got arrested for what. But another main type are what's known as self-report studies. People themselves report on their crime. And you might think, and we're going to address this issue shortly, you might think people wouldn't tell the truth if they're being asked about crime. And you'd be wrong. They do tell the truth. We know they tell the truth. So that's not the problem with self-report studies. It is a good way to find out about certain kinds of crime. It's not a great way to find out about super serious violent crimes. Like if I went and asked Yuba College students, how many of you raped somebody last year? How many of you murdered somebody last year? I might not get very accurate data. Again, not because people are lying, but just because we probably don't have, it'd be hard to find in your survey any rapists or murderers. So there wouldn't be any in your, so even if everyone told the truth, you'd have an answer of zero. There's zero murderers and rapists, but we know there are some. So we're going to talk about this in a second, but those are the two main ways we can look at, and why are they called official and unofficial? Well, this is really just measuring what the cops are doing. If we ask cops, who did you arrest and how many? Then they'll tell us. And it's a measure of their official activity. It's a measure of what the cops did. The cops arrested this person, they arrested that person. It's not a measure of what people did. To find out what people were up to, you have to ask them. And so this is an unofficial measure because it's measuring actual regular people and what did they say they did or not. So we don't want to make the mistake of thinking that official is better than unofficial. Anytime you do measurement, there's two things that you need to worry about. And this is true whether you're measuring your own body weight or the temperature or anything like that. You need to make sure that the thing you're using to measure it has both validity and reliability. Validity is it accurate? Accuracy. And reliability is consistency. I don't know if you ever weigh yourself on a scale. I like to weigh myself at home. If I get on my scale and it tells me that I'm 50 pounds, well, that's not a valid scale. That's not accurate. But if it tells me I'm 50 pounds, but then I picked up a 10-pound weight and I got on it and it told me I was 60 pounds now, well, it might be reliable. It's not telling me the right thing, but it went up the right amount when I did it, when it went up. I once went to a doctor and got weighed, and he said I weighed like 180. I'm like, doctor, I don't weigh 180. I know it's like 20 pounds more than that. And he goes, yeah, that's sort of something I do for my female patients. I go, what? He goes, I calibrate my scale 20 pounds light. I go, why? He goes, well, they come in and they weigh and they say, oh, well, I didn't know I was so light, and they get a smile on their face. He says, for me, I don't need to know your exact weight. That doesn't really mean anything to me. I do need to know if your weight went up or down since the last time you were here. And my scale tells me that reliably. So if you did gain weight, my scale will tell me that. I don't know your exact weight. And well, I happen to know it's 20 pounds more than what it showed you, but you don't need to know your exact weight is what he's saying. I mean, it's a little bit dishonest. But what I'm saying is, you see the difference there between an accurate scale that's telling you the right thing versus one that's measuring correctly, it's just not giving you the right answer. Well, arrest statistics come from the FBI. The most common one is something called the FBI Uniform Crime Report, the UCR. So the FBI is the nation's police force. They're based in DC, and they're kind of like the cops for the whole country. And when we ask, like, is crime going up or not? When I showed you that crime rate, most of that data comes from the FBI. When the newspaper reports or the news reports, crime is up in America or down in America, they're giving you the FBI statistics. And how are these statistics gotten? There's a list of crimes. This Uniform Crime Report, it's a list of crimes. It's all the crimes. There's hundreds of them. Everything from jaywalking to petty theft to major theft, larceny, grand larceny, all kinds of stuff. Assault, rape, murder, arson. And again, like I said before, if you ask in any given year, are these crimes up? Well, some will be up and some will be down. There's so many different crimes that they have different measurements for each other. And the FBI sends out a survey. We talked about surveys. Well, the FBI sends a survey to all the police departments in the whole country. And they say, can you tell us, here's a list of crimes. Can you tell us how many arrests you made last year for each of these crimes? So all the police departments in the country have to report back to the FBI and say, we made this many arsons arrests, this many meth arrests, this many bank robbery. And they send that to the FBI. Then the FBI compiles all this, all the data from California, every single police department that reported. Some don't, some are behind or didn't report, but they're all supposed to report. And you get all this data and you put it into one big uniform crime report. That's all the data for the country. And that way we can see, like, is murder up or down? Is assault up or down over the whole country? And again, if you say is crime up or down, it can depend. I said compared to when and which crime. Another thing you could ask is where. I mean, sometimes crime might be up in like Chicago, but down in LA, New York, and Boston. Or sometimes it'll be up in the western states, but down in the eastern states. So America's a big country. So trying to answer a simple question like, is crime up or down? It's not simple. And these arrest statistics are not reliable. We were just talking about reliability and validity. They're not validity, they're not valid. As we just talked about, arrests don't equal crime. So if you're trying to measure how much crime there is, and you found out there was 0 arrests for meth, that's not a valid measure. 0 is not the answer. It's something greater than 0. And so you got an invalid answer from the arrest statistics. And then if you ask, well, is it at least reliable? Like, if the cops arrested more people for meth this year than they did last year, does that at least tell me that meth use is up? Maybe I don't know how many are doing meth, but I know it's up because the cops arrested more people for it. Well, it's not reliable either, because why do cops decide to arrest people? For political reasons, oftentimes. Like they might say, the mayor might say, we want you guys to crack down on meth right now. So the cops go, okay, the mayor gave us orders. So they start arresting a bunch of people for meth that month. And then the mayor forgets about it, and they forget about it, and they move on to other things. And so you see in the statistics, in that month of March, there was a big spike in meth arrests. Well, does that mean there was a big spike in meth use? No, the meth use was the same people using meth in March as in February, but suddenly they just arrested a lot more people for it. So when you're looking at arrest statistics, you're not looking at crime, you're looking at what the cops are doing, and what they're doing isn't always an accurate or reliable reflection of what's actually happening. And, but the first 8 offenses, the first 8 crimes, they're known as offenses in official terms. The first 8 offenses on this list are known as the index crimes. So an index is, if you can't look at all the data that you want about something, you can try to choose some data points to collect and just look at those and see if those are telling you a story. Like, I don't know if you follow the stock market, but when they say like the Dow Industrial is up, so many percentage points. There's thousands of stock out there, but the Dow Industrial is just like 500 of them. And they just look at those 500 stocks and they say if those go up or down, we'll say that stocks in general are up or down. Now again, just like crime, stocks on any given day, some are up, some are down. But when they report in the news, the stock market was up, they use some index. And same with crime. In any given moment, some crimes will be up or some are down. But the first 8 are what are known as the serious violent felonies. Felony is a more serious crime than a misdemeanor. And serious violent felonies, what is on this list? I don't have them all memorized, but it's murder, it's assault, it's rape, it's armed robbery. These are serious violent crimes. Now, what's not on there is things like jaywalking or marijuana smoking, illegal marijuana use, or even drug use in general. Those are often considered less serious, sometimes misdemeanor types of crimes. So why do they use these 8 as the index? Because that's what people care about. If you were going to say, is crime up or down, people want to know about those ones. They don't necessarily care about jaywalking or even illegal drug use. But if armed robbery is up, if there's more chance that I'm going to get robbed at gunpoint, I want to know about it. If there's more chance that murder is happening and I'm going to get murdered, people want to know. So they use the first 8 as the index. And when the news reports crime is up, violent crime is up, they're using these 8. And it just has to be a majority of them. I mean, some of those 8 will be down and some might be up. But if the majority, the average of the 8 is a certain direction, like up or down, they'll say that's what the trend is. But again, that's not necessarily, well, that has its uses. It's not necessarily valid or reliable completely, but we do say as sociologists, if the police are arresting more people for murder, that is pretty a reliable indication that more murder is actually happening. In other words, they don't usually go around arresting people for murder if no murder happened. And it is the case that if somebody gets murdered, they generally start arresting people because people want the crime solved. Now, who they arrest might not be accurate, might not be they got the right persons, and they might arrest 10 people when only 1 person did it. Or they might arrest 1 person, but he committed 10 crimes. Remember, we were talking about arrests don't equal crimes. Well, the arrest isn't the crime, it's just the person got apprehended. But if there's more arrests for murder, we can be pretty reliable that we can reliably guess that murder itself is happening more frequently. And if armed robbery is being arrested more, it's a pretty good indication that it's actually happening more. But when we want to know about less serious forms of crime, like I want to know, sociologists, we often want to study young people, and we want to know about like things that are only illegal for young people. Those are called status crimes. Things like smoking cigarettes. That's not illegal, but for if you're under 18, it is. Underage drinking, marijuana use, underage. These are things that we as sociologists want to study because we want to know, for example, are kids who smoke marijuana in high school more likely to end up poor or something later in life? Or are kids who, dabble in shoplifting, which ones are they? Is it Latino kids or black kids? Or, we want to know about these low-level crimes. We don't only want to know about the serious violent ones. And so how do we get at those? Because the arrests are not a good indication of those. Because the cops don't usually arrest people for low-level, non-serious crime. And so if you were trying to use arrest statistics to find out how many people jaywalked, how many people crossed the street without the light being green, lots of people did, but we don't have good data on who it was. But if you go and ask people, have you ever crossed the light? Have you ever jaywalked? Do you ever do that? Do you do it frequently? Sometimes, never. And people fill it out, that gives us data. And that data is accurate. But what's the problem with self-report data? Is it 11:15, by the way? Who's watching the clock for me? Past 11:15. Okay, we're gonna have to come back to crime measurement. Stay out of crime this weekend, I guess. I will grade your tests. I haven't graded them. If you have worries about it, I haven't really looked, but I'm thinking what I'm gonna allow for this class is, if you want to retake the exam completely, I will allow you to do that if you go to tutoring first. We have tutoring here, and if you go and set up a Zoom or live appointment with the tutor, and she reports back to me that you went to there, then I'll open up the test for you again, and you can retake it. If you just want to rewrite your essay or you ran out of time, you can let me know about that, and I can give you that. I want to help you guys pass, so I'm here to help you do that. All right, bye. If you don't want to pass, I can arrange that as well. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. You too.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.